Hello, everyone. So in case you missed our intro videos, I'm Jeanette and this is Ihsan. And I'd just like to say good afternoon. We officially welcome you to the UWill Discover Celebration of Excellence. Congratulations to our award-winning presenters today. I'll give them a round of applause. Researcher and storyteller Brene Brown, who studies courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy among leaders, says, "Daring greatly means the courage to be vulnerable. It means to show up and be seen, to ask for what you need, to talk about how you're feeling, to have the hard conversations. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are the hard conversations." We have seen hundreds of students throughout the UWill Discover project explore the conference theme, and we look forward to seeing them continue to build bridges for a more sustainable future.
An integral part of the SDGs is gaining an understanding of the land and people that surround us. The University of Windsor sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. We respect the long-standing relationships with First Nations people in this place in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and the Straits Letter Troy of Detroit. During the UWill Discover Sustainable Futures Conference, we aimed to create awareness about the United Nations Declaration for Rights of Indigenous Peoples. On June 21st, 2021, the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act received royal assent and came into force. This act provides a roadmap for the Government of Canada and the First Nations, Inuit and Métis people to work together to implement the declaration based on lasting reconciliation, healing, and cooperative relations. We look forward to sharing more about United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People through a guest article by Dr. Bev Jacobs in the UWill Discover Sustainable Futures Journal.
Congratulations to the award winners for your dedication, excellence, and contributions to the UWill Discover Sustainable Futures year-long project. You went above and beyond by working on a project outside of your courses and sharing your amazing work with conference attendees, Scholar.U Windsor, and the world. We are here to celebrate your accomplishments today. I now invite Dr. Tim Brunette to express our gratitude to those who supported the UWill Discover Sustainable Futures project.
Thanks, Ihsan and Jeanette. They are fearless team leaders as part of our project, both at the Student Success and Leadership Center. Jeanette is our team lead, and Ihsan is the conference chair here. So I want to start by thanking them for leading the team, and the team, you saw a few of the members when you walked in, and they've been wonderful. This was the first year that we found funding to pay everybody who worked at UWill Discover this year. And so last year, people did this above their schooling, above and beyond their jobs, and I really wanted to make that change. And there were a lot of people who helped me do that. So we also brought in the Outstanding Scholars Program. And the Outstanding Scholars Program, raise your hand if you're an OS student. Yeah, okay, so you can see they're a big part of leading this conference. We have just under 350 outstanding scholars at the university. You see them all over, running clubs, doing things for societies, being on committees. Well, this year, that incoming group got our theme started. So the Outstanding Scholars candidates at the back of the room, you're going to hear them present. There were 40 groups that did the SDGs this year. They were the top group of the 40, and it was a very competitive group, so I really applaud them. So just give them a little shout out there. I'm going to blow their cover because you're going to think that they're probably upper year students. They're first year students, and they've done a great job. The SSHRC committee, I wanted to make sure Natasha was here and thank her for her team helping me through. This is my first shirt grant, so It's a big moment, so thank you. Also, Chris Hauser, who called me up 2 days after he started as interim VP, and he asked me to come to his office, which makes probably some people nervous. I wasn't sure where that was going. I had no idea. And he offered to get some support, and he said, how much does it cost to run the conference? And I said, well, it can cost $80,000. He laughed. He said, I'll give you 20. And I said, that's good. And so we actually did turn that 20 into more money by getting SSHRC funded. So this conference is partially funded by SSHRC, and also Ignite program. There's just so many different pieces that we use to get this to come together. Levy Library of Dr. Slindenberg here today. They have been through the UWill Discover conference through thick and thin, along with our so many other partners. So I want to thank Dr. Slindenberg for being here, and Pascal, who's going to help us with the journal coming up. And I also want to thank our AV team, which they'll watch this later, but Hermes he's the one who did the shout out there. He did all the videos for us, and that's been great. And I also want to thank Dr. Patty Weir, who the Vice President's academic office has always been extraordinarily supportive of pretty much everything on the list, like everything. So, and I also want to acknowledge my director at the Student Success and Leadership Center, Cindy Krupp, who has been a wonderful leader for our office. So I thank you. The most important thank yous mean that I'm going to be gone in a few seconds. Thank you to the participants. Thank you for taking the time to do the extra work, to contribute, to motivate your friends, and thank you to your family and your friends for supporting you while being here. Okay, so I probably missed a million thank yous, but I wanted to acknowledge all the hard work that helped support the great work that students are doing.
The conference theme is based on human development and a connection to our commitment to being stewards of the environment. First, we shared the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, a plan to flourishing future for the year 2030. Next, we highlighted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Then, the International Decade for People of African Descent, 2015 to 2024. And the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. These initiatives help our campus frame our work as global citizens who can have a positive impact on the environment and the populations worldwide. The conference activities use the human capabilities approach as the underpinning framework. The framework allowed students to think reflectively about their academic journeys during the conference and as global citizens.
So as Dr. Burnett mentioned, outstanding scholar students in the fall created presentations for all the SDGs and one of the themes. Today, we will hear from the award-winning group among 40 groups. We've also conducted peer reviews, a writing workshop, leadership conferences with the SDG theme, and a STEMX policy-thon. The busiest week was the conference, where we heard from students from all faculties at the University of Windsor. We thank the reviewers, facilitators, and faculty and staff who assisted us.
UWill Discover could not function without the assistance of students and on-campus collaborators, including Student Success and Leadership Center, Office of the Vice President Research and Innovation, Office of the Provost and Vice President Academic, the Levy Library, Ignite Word Study Program, STEMX Policy, and Windsor Law Center for Cities.
We've had nearly 160 presentations this past week and participation of hundreds of students for the UWill Discover Sustainable Futures year-long project. But that's not all. We now begin working on our Journal of Research Reflections to be published in September of 2023, A select group of 4 award-winning students will have the opportunity to participate in the Model United Nations trip in Washington, D.C. in November of 2023, as well as content from student presentations will be published on scholar.uwindsor.ca, which is connected to the Open Air project in Europe and Google Scholar.
Next, each presentation will last 4 minutes, and this represents a sampling of the top presentations throughout the last week's conference. Students will receive feedback from our esteemed judges. We thank our judges today, Dr. Celinda Berg, Dr. Patty Weir, Ventio, and Nadia Hardwar.
Today's presenters are brave and have showed great courage in contributing to the You Will Discover Sustainable Futures project by sharing their research and creative work. So we now invite our first presenter up, Emmanuel Boujeke, who is presenting on SPY1-mediated cell cycle effects enhance oncogenic transformation by selected drivers in human glioblastoma.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Emmanuel. I'm a student and part of the Portal Lab, which is a cancer research laboratory here at the University of Windsor. And today I'm going to be presenting my thesis project. So glioblastoma multiforme is the most frequent and aggressive primary brain tumor in adults. Patients diagnosed with glioblastoma have extremely poor prognosis, with survival averaging only about 14 months post-diagnosis. And one of the big treatment obstacles to glioblastoma are these brain tumor initiating cells, which are these stem-like cells that are able to initiate a tumor and then bring it back even after most of it has been destroyed. And these brain tumor initiating cells arise from neural stem cells. So these are the only cells that are dividing in your brain. And as they are dividing, their proliferation is controlled by the cell cycle. So genes that regulate cell cycle progression, particularly progression through cell cycle checkpoints, play a critical role in controlling the size of the neural stem cell pool, as well as ultimately the oncogenic transformation that leads to the formation of a tumor. Now, what we know is that usually the cell cycle is kept in check by these genes that we call tumor suppressors. I have 2 examples here. One of them is P53, and another one is P10. In our lab, we study a protein called SPY1, which is what we call an oncogene. So this is a protein that's capable of pushing the cell forward to grow and divide when it's not supposed to. And so the current project focuses on investigating how SPY1 may interact with these tumor suppressors in order to drive the formation of tumors. And so the hypothesis is that SPY1-mediated effects depend on overriding tumor suppressors in order to drive glioblastoma. And so in order to sort of investigate this, I have to be able to overexpress SPY1 in the brain. And to do this, our lab developed a transgenic mouse model that we call the NTA SPY1 model. So essentially, this mouse allows us to overexpress SPY1 in the brain of mice, particularly in their neural stem cells. And so going forward with this, the first thing that I wanted to do was to determine the levels of these 2 tumor suppressors in the mouse brain. And so in order to do this, I performed a technique that we call immunohistochemistry. So I extracted the brains from the mice, and I stained it with antibodies that essentially allow me to see what cells are expressing these proteins. And so the first, what I looked at is a P53 and P10. And so what you can see on the right over here is that in the NTA SPY1 mice, so again, those are those mice that have high levels of SPY1, we see that P53 is higher in their hippocampus. For P10, we see that in the cortex and the hippocampus, P10 is higher in these NTA mice. So that tells us that perhaps in response to the stress induced by an oncogene like SPY1 being overexpressed, P53 and P10 go up in order to sort of act as a defense mechanism to prevent the formation of tumors. So next, I wanted to see what would happen once I get rid of these tumor suppressors and look at the effects of P53 and P10. And so to do this, I actually used a virus to knock down P53, and I used a P10 inhibitor to reduce P10 activity. So once I do this, I can look at the formation of these mini tumors that we call neurospheres in a plate, and then quantify that, which tells us how much these cells are able to divide and the ability to form tumors, essentially. So the results are shown here, and what we see is that when there's that P10 inhibition, which is shown on the right there, we see that the NTA SPY1 form more spheres. So that tells us that when there's a SPY1 overexpression and there's P10 inhibition, this might somewhat cooperate in order to drive the formation of tumors. And so a conventional glioblastoma therapy is a very generalized approach that will destroy the bulk of a tumor, but then leave behind these brain tumor initiating cells that often contain high levels of SPY1 and then mutations in their tumor suppressors. And these cells can then bring back the tumor, leading to relapse. And so what we want to work towards is a targeted therapy in which by targeting proteins like SPY1, we're able to take out brain tumor initiating cells, leading to complete tumor regression, remission, and ultimately better patient outcomes. With that, I'd like to thank Dr. Lisa Porter, Dr. Durova-Lubonska, and Dr. Keith Frank Stringer for their guidance throughout this project, as well as the entire Perrotta team for their continued support throughout the year.
Thank you so much. I'll invite up our next presenter, Leah Levy, who will be presenting Constraint Poetry on Disability and Disability as Constraint. Hi, everyone. So I'm Leah Levy, and this is Constraint Poetry on Disability and Disability as Constraint. Now, looking at me, you probably don't know that I have multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis, or MS, is a neurological disability, and it's a neurological disease that can cause severe disability. And about 40% of people with it cannot walk without walking aids. Now, I want you to imagine if one day you were suddenly unable to walk and you needed help with basic everyday tasks like getting out of bed. 2 years ago in the summer, that was me. Over a period of a few weeks, I lost feeling in my legs and was unable to walk for a few weeks. And I'd like to read a poem that I wrote reflecting back on that period. It's called Mrs. Unwell poem. I used to be a cripple in old hospice gowns, spinal taps, cheap blue futons. I surfed on bleeding wet rills of noise of MRIs and cracked faulty neurons. In June smoked daily the sick, composing the joints as canes. And numb legs undo in summer solely all life skills. Hollowing legs, losing my walk, walkers and nurses my buoys. Inured to the brain, myelin mops floss my spine on MRIs. Hand spasms pen my abrupt eulogy. In July, the bored ailment is now smoking me. Hoping my jaw can eat suns, then sunny ODs. I lunch the whole star in sections of bright. They glow in magma envy and sun pyres. Uthoff sign currently governs traffic gyres in my body. My body is defrosting away. Me, a puddle duo. Now, while I have an invisible constraint of MS, so too does this poem have an invisible constraint that you wouldn't notice. So this poem actually uses something called homovocalism, which is a writing restraint with the same vowel pattern in each line. So the 23 vowels that you see in the title, they appear in the same order in every line of the poem. So something about this means that this poem falls into constraint poetry, and that's a genre that uses writing restrictions instead of writing freely. And so I want to talk a little bit about the implications that constraint poetry has for disability studies. So because it has a hidden constraint, it sort of mirrors the effect of MS, which it appears hidden to you, but to me it affects me. And so in my presentation, I talked a little bit about my future plans, and in that, I actually wrote this presentation for graduate school applications for creative writing in September. And in that, I talked about planning to write my own constraint poetry, a collection of it, on disability. And in that, I would hope to involve research of interviewing medical professionals as well as disabled people for their experiences. And in that, I would hope to get a wide variety of everyday constraints that disabled people face, and that I could reflect that in the constraint writing. And so I would try to challenge stereotypes of disabled people in that, especially stereotypes that sort of pigeonhole all disabled people into one box when there's a wide variety of symptoms that people experience. And in that, I would also hope to relate the writing constraint to the disability, such as me using a constraint that initially you don't realize, as you don't initially realize that I have MS. And so in that goal, I hope to apply constraint poetry to disabled people, which is not yet something that has been done, and it's where I see a potential for it. And in that, I hope to get expression and catharsis for the writer, but also awareness on disability and information for the reader. So thanks so much, and I hope you learned something from this presentation. Do the judges have any comments?
Oh, sorry, we forgot to do that.
Do you want to do the first one first? Or?
We'll start with Leah and then they can ask Emmanuel. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. That's us. That's us. All right.
Thank you so much, and I just want to make a special nod to the vulnerability and sharing, and I really appreciate the way in which, I will admit, I wasn't certain what it was going to look like when it started, and I love the connection between the learning about poetry and this form of poetry and your experience itself. And I guess one of my questions for you would be just which came first, like the understanding of the poetry type and then connecting it to your experience, or did you seek out that poetry type? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question?
I thought
it
was just comments. Oh, am I supposed to just do comments? Sorry, someone said questions. Actually, it's really fun. No, you don't have to answer.
Oh, I get it.
Okay. I'm sorry, I think I messed it up.
She didn't answer one question.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's the one question. Okay, so thank you for that question. I can go a little bit into how that came about. So I did start with the constraint poetry and the constraint writing, specifically because my last creative writing class in the previous school year, it was a topic class and the topic was constraint writing. So we sort of had to pick a writing constraint, and initially I thought, what is something I could relate to constraint? And so that's where the MS portion came in. So it did start with sort of the constraint.
I'll be very fast. I just want to say thank you so much, and it was an amazing. I just love the connection and the learning that you presented, because it was learning about you, but also this exposing me to this new type of poetry. So thanks.
It's okay, you did not mess up, Dr. Berg. Thank you, Leah, that was amazing. And I too thank you for sharing a very personal story in a very public space. You bring visibility to disability, which I think is very, very important. I really liked your choice of words, which is likely intentional because you're an English major. I really liked your use of the word hidden. I think you're a very authentic presenter, a very good tone, really connected with the audience, and I felt that it was very personal. So thank you very much. Excellent.
We'll ask for any comments on Emmanuel's presentation.
Take us back. So Leah, that was a great presentation. Emmanuel, also a very well presented. I do love how you obviously explained everything. So start from the beginning, which again, completely new topic to me. Everyone obviously has cancer has impacted, so many people. So to see that and understand those specific genes and what you are doing in the lab, I think you presented your content really well in your research. So great job. Thank you.
Yeah, great job presenting. It was very clear and very authoritative. One comment that I would like to make is I would like to see what's the overall goal of your project, because you talked about the discovery and why certain genes affected certain things. You can tell I'm not scientific, so but I would like to see the overall goal of the project and what is this going to lead to. So what's the next step? So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So yeah, ultimately what we want to do is that we want to develop credit therapeutics to treat cancer. one of the big challenges that I mentioned during my presentation was those stem cells that can cause relapse, bring a tumor back even after you hammer it with chemotherapy and kill most of it. And so the protein that we studied, called SPY1, down the road, maybe we want to develop a drug that targets SPY1. That way we can completely eradicate a tumor and prevent it from coming back. So yeah, that's sort of what we're working towards. Thank you.
All right, we'll invite our next presenter up, Marianna Dänner, who is presenting A Long Way to Go Till 30 by 30, an analysis of Canada's legal marine protection.
Hi everyone, my name is Marianna and I'm presenting on marine protected areas. So what's the issue? Between 1970 and 2012, marine wildlife populations have declined by 49%. Over 90% of the world's fish stocks are considered to be fully exploited, overexploited, or even depleted. And in Canada in particular, less than 1 in 3 of the fish stocks can be considered healthy. But why do we need healthy oceans? The oceans absorb up to 90% of the excess heat that results from climate change, and they absorb up to 23% of the human emissions. They produce at least 50% of the oxygen we breathe, and they provide 10 to 12% of the world population with food. So that is roughly 870 million people. And some economies are even heavily dependent on marine tourism. Some island nations generate more than 50% of their whole GDP with marine tourism. But why do we need marine protected areas in particular? Marine wildlife has a very fast recovery rate. So that means that when you give them some time to recover and breathe, then they'll bounce back pretty fast in most of the cases. So we need marine protected areas that are clearly defined geographical spaces where you prohibit some or the major human activities that are harmful, such as fishing and mining. During my research, I looked at the different acts and pieces of legislation that Canada has when it comes to ocean conservation. And the analysis showed that most of them have more or less the same issues. That is the strong resistance of the traditional fishing industry, which is basically only economically viable because the government still puts subsidies in it. And that's the reason why economic objectives mostly outweigh the ecological objectives in policymaking. Apart from that, there's a clear underfunding and understaffing of the relevant departments. And most importantly, there are division of power issues. This is a common problem in the Canadian law that I observed. So that means that there's not enough cooperation and coordination between the different levels of government. So mostly the federal and the provincial levels of government. And when it comes to marine protected areas in particular, the designation and enforcement lacks of efficiency. So designating a marine protected area takes at least 10 years and can take up to 20 years, which is way too little to provide timely protection. When you look at the enforcement, I looked at the example of the southern resident killer whale population. So in the times where these whales were present, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans vessels were only there 1% of the times, while US vessels were there 19 to 25% of the times. So what can we do? We need better cooperation between the different levels of government, and for that we have to make sure that individuals on both levels of government follow the same objectives and can cooperate. We need a clearer distribution of responsibilities because there are many actors involved, and so it has to be clearly set out who's responsible for what so that the policies actually align. And lastly, we need legal personhood of marine ecosystems so that we can better and easier protect them in court. So my conclusion was that Canada tries to assume an international leadership role when it comes to ocean conservation, but its national policies and legislation clearly lacks of effectiveness. It's important that individuals as voters show the policymakers that ecological objectives are more important than economic objectives, or at least that economic objectives don't always outweigh the ecological objectives. Thank you very much.
Do the judges have any comments?
Thank you, Marianna. I really like it that it's very clear the way that you lay out your presentation, starting with a problem and solution. It's very convincing, so you make me believe your theory and why we need to care and why everyone should cooperate to make the marine life better. So great job.
Wonderful presentation. We've had some experience working together this semester, so I think you did a very well presentation in terms of your research, right? Giving everyone an understanding of the problem, right? And really showing the facts and understanding where there are lacks in legislation and what can be done for the future to move forward and to create a sustainable world. So great presentation.
I now invite Natasha Sarkis and Brook-lyn Phelan to present a systematic review of commercially available sports bras with integrated heart rate monitors. I'll give them a round of applause. So hello everyone and welcome to our presentation. My name is Brook-lyn. My name is Natasha. And today we're going to be presenting to you a systematic review that we are currently working on that is looking into commercially available sports bras with integrated heart rate technology.
So it's important to have these accurate heart rate measurements because during exercise, your muscles are working more intensely to deliver oxygen to those tissues, which is why your heart rate increases during exercise. So in order to have accurate heart rate measurements, it's important because we want to inform training sessions for coaches and athletes, assess their aerobic fitness, train to desired intensity, and track the progression of the athletes, as well as we want to track if there's any arrhythmias or dangerous heart rates that we don't want to miss during accurate heart rate measurement testing.
So now we can step into the problem. And the problem is, it's very difficult to get these accurate heart rate measurements, especially when athletes are working at high levels of intensities. And this problem is even bigger for our female athletes. And it all starts with the design of chest strap heart rate monitors, which are designed to be placed right beneath the pectoral line and right above the xiphoid process.
So in men, it is fully functional because they do not wear undergarments under their uniform, so that chest strap monitor can lie directly under the pectoral line, which leads to those accurate measurements. However, the problem comes in for women when they wear a sports bra. That band of the sports bra lies exactly where that monitor is supposed to be, which is an obstruction, and they're forced to place that chest strap monitor under the sports bra. This leads to not the ideal place for the monitor, and it will lead to inaccurate readings. As well, it's more susceptible to movement when it's lower on the torso, and it's less comfortable as well for women in sports. Because of this problem, there are sports bras with integrated heart rate monitor technology available on the market. However, they do possess limitations. So for one, they're uncomfortable amongst most of the women that have tested this sports bra during high levels of exercise intensity. As well, they're limited to the company-made monitor. So for example, buying an Adidas Smart Bra comes with the company-made monitor that Adidas has created, which is not consistent and ideal for coaches because they'd like the team to be consistent among the heart rate monitor that they are using. As well, these sports bras become inaccurate during high levels of exercise intensity.
So now to step into our solution. So we would like to create a sports bra that is accurate and reliable at high intensities of exercise. It is going to be comfortable and it will prevent the slipping. So this involves electrodes that will line the inside of the sports bra band touching directly against the skin, and then a heart rate monitor in that desired location right above the xiphoid process. What's unique to this is that it will be interchangeable depending on user preference, and it will allow for consistency for coaches. They're able to use the heart rate monitors that they would like to use on their athletes. So in order to create a prototype and to test out the prototype, we have to start with the literature, and that's the step that we're on right now. So we're completing a systematic review using the software Covidence, and we are each completing a review individually, and Covidence will highlight any discrepancies between our reviews so we can work through them together. Our keyword searches are going to be heart rate, sports bra, monitor, and cardiovascular.
So after reviewing the literature that we have out there and kind of narrowing it down to what is out there and looking at the limitations, we're expected to see that there's currently no comfortable sports bra with a removable heart rate monitor, which has never been done before, that is accurate and reliable, which is available for females to track their various levels of intensity as well as be accurate at the same time. So because of these expected results, in the future, we hope to create a prototype of a smart in-house bra that is able to accurately measure those heart rates on the field for women. So because of reviewing the literature and the research, as well as talking to coaches and trainers at the University of Windsor who are experiencing this problem firsthand, we can see that it's a prevalent and important problem in female sports. So this is why we want to create that smart bra in order to create equality amongst heart rate measurements for both men and women in the sports industry.
Over the last several years, there has been a rise in the passion for female sports, but still in 2023, it's well recognized that there is a gap between the male and female sport industry. So we do not want our female athletes to have to exchange comfort for accurate heart rate measurements. So the ultimate goal of this project is to bridge the gap and to create equality for our female athletes at the training level.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Have any comments from the judges?
So, really fascinating. I can't wait until, that's my question. Do you see this being used in other environments other than the exercise, cardiovascular and all that?
So I can go ahead and then Brooklyn, you can add comments. So for now, we are creating this design primarily for the sports industry. However, there are many ways that we can use this in other fields. For example, people with disabilities or people who have medical conditions where their heart rate needs to be tracked at all times. This would be an easy way for measurements to come back accurately as well as to be comfortable for the patient. So definitely in the medical field as well as the sports field we're looking at.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
As a librarian and an athlete, systematic reviews on sports bras is certainly resonating with me, and I really appreciate that application and that emphasis on the process of starting with the systematic review and really taking us to that practicality side. And I would be interested in kind of understanding in the future, about what the factors are that you evaluated in the systematic review and how you made that connection across that literature, because I'm sure that's one of the struggles with the codance and all that with those pieces. But I think what is so strong about this is taking us from that systematic review part where you're looking at that literature and walking all the way through back to that very practical side of that hope for the sports bra at the end that actually delivers.
So, thank you so much.
I now invite Madi to present the effectiveness of using NamePrism to identify ethnicities.
Imagine an executive at a company trying to provide equal opportunities by creating a diverse workplace, or a doctor trying to conduct genetic screening on different racial categories, with both the doctor and the executive using online tools in order to find ethnicities, or maybe they are relying on studies that use those tools. NamePrism is an example of these tools, and today I'm going to be presenting the effectiveness of using NamePrism to identify ethnicities. NamePrism is a web application that takes the name as an input and outputs ethnicities. It classifies names into one of 6 ethnicities: white, black, Asian and Pacific Islanders, American Indian and Alaska Native, more than 2 races, or Hispanic. On the screen is a QR code that you can scan in order to try NamePrism. While studying ethnic CEOs, the obstacles that they face, and how they perform, we have encountered unexpected results by NamePrism. NamePrism has been relied on in over 200 research studies, and this is adding to previous literature. So making sure that NamePrism is an accurate tool will improve education. Also, moving towards equity, diversity, and inclusion, NamePrism as an accurate tool will improve diversity and will also improve the representation in the corporate structure. Our study is composed of two main stages, data collection and data analysis. Starting with data collection, we run 335 names through NamePrism, and we recorded the results. Next, we observed the CEO's pictures and recorded the results where possible. Lastly, we found the ethnicities of each CEO through online biographies and histories of each. To analyze the data, we used three separate Python scripts. The first script compares hand-collected data with NamePrism results. In case the data does not match, another Python script is used in order to isolate the data into another Excel sheet for further analysis. Lastly, the improperly classified data is used in order to find the number of CEOs that are ethnic but classified as non-ethnic versus those that are non-ethnic but classified as ethnic. Out of the 335 names that were tested, 236 hand-collected data that matched with NamePrism's results, which is approximately 70.44%, whereas 99 ethnicities did not match, and this is approximately 29.55%. And out of the 99 names that were incorrectly classified, 27 non-ethnic CEOs were classified as ethnic. And 72 CEOs were non-ethnic are classified as ethnic, which is approximately 27.27% and 72.72% respectively. So in conclusion, NamePrism is not recommended to be used as a method in order to find ethnicities, whereas it should be used in combination with other methods for optimized results. Lastly, I would like to thank Professor Ihab Said from the School of Business for the continuous support and the supervision in this research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aya. It was great to hear that presentation. Our judges have any comments?
Great presentation. That was the first time I'm hearing of NamePrisms, and kind of my main comment was your conclusion is starting it with 5 ethnicities seems so small and not inclusive, right? Of many more ethnicities that we do have that are 5, and that is something that's tricky when you're hiring and you are filling out these forms that, you know, sometimes you don't have a category that fits you and you have to say other, right? Which can definitely impact how people feel, right? Their self-esteem. So great presentation.
Thank you for sharing this research. I have a question. So what is your recommendation?
So definitely use NamePrism, but with combination, in combination with other methods. Or if there's a chance to redesign NamePrism, maybe include more labeled names, because NamePrism is basically trained on over 74 million names, but still not a lot of names are included, so maybe diversify the set that the NamePrism was trained on.
I now invite Felicia Varacalli to present nursing perspectives of family-centered rounds in critical care units.
Doesn't give away that I'm Italian. Hopefully my loud voice will. All right, so my name is, I feel like, I don't know, I might scream into your ears if I use this. So my name is Felicia. I'm a thesis student in nursing, and my thesis looks at nursing perspectives of adult critical care units, looking at that family-centered rounds aspect. So critical care medicine, as you may know, is a really intense aspect of medicine. These patients require 24-hour monitoring. They're very, very sick. And a lot of times these patients are on life support. So as you can see, this person here is on a ventilator. So these patients obviously cannot talk for themselves. So families are of utmost importance in this area. They are left with decision-making and communicating for these patients. So family-centered care is a really important aspect of critical care. And family-centered rounding is a component of family-centered care. So family-centered rounds are interdisciplinary work rounds that take place at the bedside every day. And it's where you encompass the family into making the plan and evaluating the process of your rounds and choices and treatment. And nurses are really important in including family into these rounds and teaching them, if you will, the ropes of family-centered rounds. So my thesis is looking at investigating nursing perspectives of family-centered rounds in adult critical care units in 4 hospitals in southwestern Ontario, looking at 6 critical care units. So my research questions are as follows. I'm looking at what nurses think the best structures and processes for supporting best practices for family-centered rounds are. I'm looking at what nurses think the top advantages and disadvantages to family-centered rounds are, and what nurse-related factors, such as like age, experience, are associated with either a positive or a negative perception of family-centered rounds. So brief literature review, it's not very good, if I'm being honest. There were like 5 relevant articles. They were not very rigorous. Nurses' perspectives were inconsistent. I kind of summarized some positive and negative perceptions on the board there, but nothing was really straight across the board, if you will, from the literature. So I have designed a survey, 54 questions. I've adapted it from a couple different existing surveys along with the literature that I've added in a few things I wanted to look at. And I'm sampling critical care nurses that work currently in an adult critical care unit. Like I said, one of those 6 critical care units across 4 southwestern Ontario hospitals. I have received RED clearance from Windsor, the University of Windsor, and all 4 hospitals. The survey has gone out to all these participants through their institutional, so their hospital email address, through their managers that I've been in connections with, and I'll just use Microsoft Excel to analyze some of the descriptive data that I found. So I am in data collection right now, but I have wrapped up some preliminary results. 75 had completed the survey when I did this, but currently I have over 120. So these things may change in the future. Of them, we asked, hey, have you had a chance to participate in family-centered rounds? About 2/3 said yes, but we still looked at what they all thought, and 3/4 or so thought, yeah, I believe families should be invited to rounds. I am comfortable having family present, and I believe that family-centered rounds helps families to understand their conditions and the treatments that we're implementing on them. So we asked them, hey, what are your top 3 advantages and barriers? So they feel that the critical care team can update the family during rounds, they can share valuable information, and they can build that rapport with the family. Some barriers, you don't know what time rounds are going to happen, doctors are busy, families' baseline health literacy, they don't really understand what you're saying, and extensive use of medical jargon within the healthcare team is always an issue. COVID-19 itself has affected family-centered rounding, so limited number of visitors, visiting hours are restricted, and enforcing that vaccination status on those visitors as well during this time. About 70% though feel their unit is not adequately staffed to implement family-centered rounds, which is kind of an issue. Again, over 3/4 feel there's just not enough time to address all the family member questions that they want to ask during rounds. So at the end, we just left it a basic yes and no question. Hey, do you think family-centered rounds should be implemented in your institution? And about 63% said yes. Nothing too crazy, but enough that I feel like over half would be satisfied with family-centered rounding. So in conclusion, nursing support is obviously really crucial to implement family-centered rounding in critical care units. I'm just working on some preliminary data, but it looks like over half of nurses are generally satisfied with rounding and want it to be implemented in their hospital. And final results will be coming soon. I didn't know it was a comments only.
We will not ask you questions.
I don't mind.
But thank you for your presentation. Having just gone through a family member being hospitalized, I think what you've raised is really important. And before you got to the barriers, I thought, well, you don't know when people are going to be there to talk to you. So nurses play a critical role in patient care. I think that is loud and clear. I really appreciate that you had a very comprehensive list of research questions and that they seem to be grounded in the literature from your last slide, and that you did a very, very good job clearly presenting your preliminary results. So very nice presentation. Thank you.
Of the same experience as Patty, I'm just wondering, like, do the nurses, do they take into account the family's background, like their cultural background and stuff like that too?
In what ways related to rounding?
So like, so in my experience,
Sorry.
at the bed, it's okay, no, it's me, I'm trying to get this out and not take up too much time. So in my experience at the bedside, when we talk about smudging, for example, like, are there questions like that in your survey? Like,
in my survey, no.
okay.
I've not. However, I have actually had, so I am an ICU nurse. Okay,
Great,
so
great.
as background. So I have seen some experience where we do like go out of our way to bend the rules a bit for certain cultural practices.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, close your eyes, shut the door, let's do this. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely, I love the way you walked through in the preliminary notes. As you work through, I just want to encourage, you know, the consideration of inferential, because one of the things that is the relationship between different factors. So whether those who have engaged in family-centered rounds are more or less likely to answer yes or no to that second question. So obviously not in the preliminary stage, but certainly. Okay.
I cut it out because it was 4 minutes.
Yeah.
That's okay. About 2/3 of the people who had done rounds said yes, they want it, and about 56% of the people who haven't done rounds said yes, they want it. So more than the people who have.
Okay. And looking at that, whether that's significant, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, me too.
Thank you very much.
I now invite Sandra Hoang to present Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Post-Secondary Science Classrooms.
Hello everyone, my name is Sandra Hoang, and today I'll be talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion in post-secondary science classrooms. So to start off, a big part of my background research when I started was kind of looking at science classrooms. And there was a big focus on science curriculum specifically, and how they can be inclusive, especially with the, for example, Orange Shirt Day movement, as well as the BLM movement, and a lot of the topics that has stirred. So as I read into this, I realized that there's minimal research within EDI, within science curriculum. And then as I read more questions came to arise. So I want to ask a question to the audience. How many of you guys have had a class with a textbook? Yes, so most of us, right? How many of us have actually read that textbook front to back? I know I definitely have not, especially not in all of my classes. So again, those questions came up of there is more to a classroom than just a textbook. It is important, right? But there are other topics, such as attainable skills within the classroom. How nowadays professors are moving from that traditional, let's talk in front of the classroom, and then once the class is done, I'm going to leave. And then you can talk to me during my office hours if you want. We are now moving towards a classroom that is more, let's have an activity. Let's go into groups. Let's talk about a topic. And I, as a prof, will walk around and listen to you guys talk. We'll interact, and I'll get to hear you guys' opinions, your thoughts. So because of this kind of shift in the classroom, the roles also shift. It is no longer more of a disconnect between professors and students. Now students are able to know the professors know their students. And so there's this idea of students now want to feel like they belong in a classroom, that they belong in the group that they're working in, or that they feel like they're included or that they're seen inside the classroom. Makes sense. So with that little background, that was my purpose of my thesis paper, which is where my studies intends to provide insight on the thoughts instructors and students have in regards to EDI in science courses. So the intent or the main idea of this is perspective. So the perspective of getting both sides of the opinion of professors as well as students, especially voices who may not be heard. So going into my research questions, I get both sides of the story, right? Cognitive profs going up to profs and asking, hey, what do you think about EDI in the classroom? The answer may be nothing, right? And those profs are valid to have those opinions, and I'd like to hear those opinions. But some profs may say like, oh, I do this, this, and this in the classroom. And now I would go to the student side and ask them, what do you guys think about EDI in the classroom? Do you guys see EDI in the classroom? And how do you feel about it? So the main idea of these research questions is potentially seeing whether or not what the professor does reflects on what the students see in the classroom. So final thing is about the research design. In essence, I would be emailing professors to request participation in the study, and then going to the classroom to talk to the students to see if they would like to participate. And then 3 things will occur, sometimes simultaneously, depending on how many participants there are. Fingers crossed that there's a lot. Is first the interview. So interview is about 30 to 45 minutes long in a private room. Here, the participants will be able to speak freely. There is no judgment in any sort of way to what these participants will say. These will be recorded so that they can be transcribed at a later time. This is so that we can put it into a code, and this can be analyzed to look for themes. For example, if someone says lack thereof very, very often, that'll come up in the analysis portion. Or if someone says that's not really something I really noticed, or other keywords or other key themes that are across the classroom or across a student body will come up. Thank you. I wrote questions, but I guess comments.
So thank you for bringing up a very important question, but I feel like I have more question than comment because it appears that you just started your research, right? And you haven't collected data yet. That's why I'm not sure. I mean, there's still a lot that we need to see before I guess I can make any comment, but up to this point, a great job. Like you told us what you're working on, but I'm really interested to see the next or the second round or the next round. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that your 3 questions, your research questions, to include the instructor side, but then also the student side, which is key. I'm also eager to see this research, right, for our campus. Right? I mean, I don't know if you're only researching the Windsor campus or other campuses and instructors, but to see how EDI can not just be embedded into science classes, but also other classes on the campus. So definitely interested to see phase 2 of your presentation, but a great presentation. I love your questions and how you frame that. And the transcription, I think of that word search will also be interesting in your research. Thanks.
Thank you. I now invite Lila Iriburiro Happy to present African Indigenous knowledge at the intersect of environmental sustainability and legal precedent. Who do you consider to be an expert? What credentials do they hold? What do they look like? And where do they come from? This presentation will challenge some of those preconceived notions. My name is Lila Iriburiro Happy, a 4th-year law and politics student at UWindsor, and my research is on African Indigenous knowledge at the intersect of environmental sustainability and legal precedent. The methodology summarized in this agenda is intersectional. I look at African Indigenous knowledge, UNPAD, UNDRIP, and the SDGs. There is no number list or bullet points to suggest a hierarchical order, rather an intersectional approach. The research question is, how have humans interacted with the environment independent from and prior to Western Eurocentric scientific knowledge systems? This led me to indigeneity.
comprising of less than 5% of the world's population, Indigenous people protect and nurture 80% of global biodiversity. And as enshrined in UN DRIP, it is important to recognize the long-standing relationship between Indigenous people and the environment, which automatically qualifies us as knowledge keepers and experts. Specifically, we will be looking at the African context. How many know that the African continent only emits 2 to 3% of global carbon dioxide emissions? This fact is usually hidden due to environmental apartheid. However, I'll be looking at 4 case studies that exemplify how African Indigenous knowledge are at the intersect of environmental sustainability and legal precedent, despite the multiple compounding factors of environmental threats on the African continent. Firstly, the Mbororo. This is the largest pastoral community in Africa, in the world, and they are from Chad mainly. And as you can see, they're constantly migrating across the Sahel due to environmental threats, as they are usually environmental refugees. Indu Humaru Ibrahim is one of the Indigenous leaders, and she says that we, Indigenous people, are the engineers of nature, and we know how to live in harmony with nature. And what she does is she incorporates African Indigenous knowledge systems with technology in order to preserve our knowledge so that it doesn't get eradicated. And that is consistent with the SDGs highlighted below. Secondly, the Zai Tassa irrigation technique from Western Sahel in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. This is a unique irrigation method where people hand dig holes in order to plant food as well as flowers and vegetation in areas that are extremely dry. And these holes are in a way where it preserves water as well as rehabilitating the soil due to the scarcity of rain. How effective is the Zai Tassa technique? If you look at this football pit, it shows 1 hectare. So a case study was conducted comparing 2 plots of land, one with the Zai Tassa technique, one without. The one without only yielded 11 kilograms of millet, which is a staple food for survival, while the one with the Zai Tassa technique yielded 553 kg of millet. That is the weight of a camel, which shows that we need to look at Indigenous ways of knowing for sustainability and survival, as the SDGs below highlight. And this is especially important to secure food security on the African continent so that kids can be healthier. And lastly, we'll look at the East African community, whereby local Indigenous people are able to use their surroundings to indicate what seasonal weathers is going to happen. And essentially, with the presence of certain birds and their callings from start to end, as well as the presence and movement of certain insects, Indigenous people in East Africa are able to tell when rain is going to come. And a study was conducted whereby 22 indicators using our environment surrounding confirmed all these weather changes. And this helps to inform Indigenous people when is the best time to plant and when is the best time to secure their food. And lastly, we'll look at a phenomenal legal precedent from South Africa known as the Indigenous Knowledge Act. A fundamental feature of this legal act is that it protects intellectual property. And this prevents biopiracy, which is the scientific colonialism where African Indigenous knowledge is being stolen by other parts of the world. So this allows the South African government the legal jurisdiction to protect Indigenous knowledge, as well as collaborate across scientific fields to ensure that if Indigenous knowledge is utilized to advance medical discoveries, Indigenous peoples are credited and protected. Lastly, I will leave you with an impartation, as there is no conclusion to this research because it is generational and sustainable. I encourage you to decolonize your minds and to also make sure that you unlearn and relearn history accurately from an anti-colonial perspective. And I hope that through this presentation, you can see that experts are Indigenous, experts are Black, experts are women, and I pray that you find what you are an expert in. Asante sana, merci beaucoup, thank you.
I'm open to any questions. Any comments? Thank you, Lila. If I'm not mistaken, you and I have met before, and you are an international student.
That's correct.
Yes, so thank you so much for sharing your knowledge of your Indigenous heritage from your home country. I think it's really important for all of us to acknowledge what Indigenous means in different spaces. I really like your intersectional approach, and I really value that you highlighted in every instance where the UN SDGs intersected with your work, and I love your empowering statement about women being experts, so thank you.
Thank you.
I was actually, my notes very much echo Patty's in terms of just bringing out those UN SDGs and being able to say that connection. I think as well, taking the opportunity to teach along the way and to be, just something as simple as making sure that things aren't numbered. And that's something that I'm learning about is, not everything has to be numbered because it does send certain messages. And so I think that one thing I appreciate about it is that learning through every slide. It wasn't just the content, but also your capacity to teach along the way. So.
I appreciate that, thanks.
Sure. So I just want to say miigwech for bringing another Indigenous perspective from across the big ocean there. Really appreciate it. And it's always nice to see Indigenous research, methodologies, ways of knowing, being, and doing brought to the forefront and saying, hey, we're here and our knowledges are just as valuable and important as Western knowledges. So miigwech, thank you very much.
I now invite Dunya Roba, Grace Taylor, Sarah Alnor, Summer El-Sawi, and Treasure Morio to present SDG Goal 5, Gender Equality. Hello, I'm Dunya Roba, and I'm a biochemistry student.
Hi, my name is Grace Taylor, and I'm double majoring in history and criminology. I'm Summer El-Sawi, and I'm in environmental science.
I'm Sarah Noor, and I'm in biomedical sciences.
My name is Treasure Morio, and I'm majoring in medical physics, and today we're presenting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 5, Gender Equality. Two twins are born named Adil and Justin, both names translating to fair and just. At a young age, Justin was allowed to play soccer in the backyard, while Adil yearned for the same freedom as she was taught to wash dishes.
We only need 2 languages. I think at least half.
Two twins are born named Adil and Justin, both names translating to fair and just. At a young age, Justin was allowed to play soccer in the backyard while Adila was told to wash dishes as she yearned for the same freedoms. Now both work in the tech field. Adila works hard but is denied twice from promotions she's qualified for, while Justin was offered multiple promotions which is underqualified. In Canada, women employees earn $3.79 less per hour and hold about 1 in 5 board of direction positions. And gender equality comes in many forms and is critical that we as a society and individuals work to end this issue.
Sustainable Development Goals is a universal call to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure by 2030 all people live in peace and prosperity. The fifth goal of SDG is to achieve gender equality and empower women and girls. This goal is especially relevant today since not only did more women than men lose their jobs as a result of COVID, but domestic violence against women has also increased. Gender discrimination happens everywhere. Women of all ages face gender inequality. Grandmothers, for example, are expected to maintain the household when their daughters are away for work. As a result, this Sustainable Development Goal is dedicated to helping millions of women and girls who, as a result of their gender, are denied human rights.
Nearly every 6 days, a woman is killed by her intimate partner. Children from violent homes have twice the rate of emotional problems, and women who are abused have trouble finding and keeping a job. This hurts all of us in so many ways. This issue is not easily solved, but a goal we can work towards is providing more women who are affected with domestic violence with support. There are 557 residential facilities for domestic violence. We need more.
What research is being done on gender equality at the University of Windsor, and what initiatives is the university actively partaking in? The University of Windsor has a responsibility to create a safe space where all of its students can succeed. There are many students, faculty, and staff involved in the discussion of gender equality on campus. Dr. Charlene Sen is one example. She is the researcher and developer of the Bystander Initiative, and through this initiative has put her research on violence against women into action. The Bystander Initiative brings students together to change their thoughts and behaviors regarding sexual violence, to prevent sexual assault, and create change-making bystanders, as well as a safer campus and community for all. The university also offers science programs aimed at creating extra opportunities for women in fields predominantly occupied by men. Programs such as Go Eng Girl encourages young girls to pursue a career in engineering, and Women in Science prepares women for STEM careers, all while in a safe, supportive, and welcoming environment.
To improve gender inequality, the Canadian government has created the Gender Results Framework. It pinpoints 6 key issues, all with their own specific context that require intentional solutions. Using the Gender Diversity and Inclusion Statistics Hub, these 6 areas are tracked by analyzing data from several different governmental departments, as seen here. The next step is to include the intersection of several different identities, for example, disability, ethnicity, and immigrant status, to their current framework. Canada understands that to change in an effective manner, we must first create measurable objectives. So what can you do? Speak up. Whether you're on social media or in the workplace, it's imperative that you don't stay silent in the face of discrimination. Know your rights and the rights of others. Use your wallet. Donate to organizations such as the Hiatus House that provide shelter and resources to abused women and children. Join. UWindsor has the Bystander Initiative, which we've previously mentioned, which provides workshops to teach about sexual violence. Educate yourself and make campus more secure for students in the process. That was SGD5, Gender Equality. Thank you for having us.
Again, another great presentation. Again, you all were amazing. I do love the flow of your presentation of talking specifically about UNSC Goal 5, the data behind it and why it's important and key, but then also highlighting both of you and sort of did the local, so what is the university doing, but then also globally, what can we do as a nation, and then what can we do locally as individuals. So great layout of the presentation.
Yeah, I want to make same comment. Great job, and I like that you each take turn talking about different point. And thank you for sharing all the different initiatives that UWindsor has, and those examples are a great way to give suggestion to the audience and what else we can do. So great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So our last presentation is from going to come up. Nazreen and Nima are going to come up, and they are the gold medal winners from our Policy-thon competition. The discussions on this competition started back in November. I'm not going to go over everything that happened, But STEMX Policy is a group of students that partnered with UWill Discover. We wrote up 2 case studies. We had 10 teams participate. They were at our writing retreat. Some of them did double duty. They did the writing retreat and the policy-thon same day. They gave up their entire Saturday. There were 2 policy case competitions. One was a student housing crisis, and you're going to hear about the other case in just a moment, so I won't spoil it. So give them a big round of applause.
Memory loss, confusion, difficulty speaking and swallowing. This just touches the surface of the many difficulties that dementia patients go through and the concerns that their caregivers have to keep in mind. The current dementia epidemic in Canada is worsening due to a lack of accessible caregiver-specific funding and social support. Our propositions: first, a reallocation of federal funding, and secondly, greater community caregiver support and education.
597,300 people in Canada are living with dementia. By 2050, this number is projected to more than double to 1.7 million Canadians with dementia.
Again, just as a reminder, our first proposition is the reallocation of federal funding. To give some context, the average care put in by caregivers totals 26 hours per week. This totals 470 million hours per year and translates to $7.3 billion per year at minimum wage. Our funding reallocation is centered around the CHT fund, or the Canada Health Transfer. Specifically, we would like to use an earmark of this fund totaling $7.8 billion directed towards mental health, home and community care, and long-term care over the next 5 years. Why is this important? Well, specifically, a 2012 study in Calgary stated that 38.5% of participants had to give up necessities due to the cost of caregiving. Additionally, 36.8% of these caregivers indicated that caregiving was just too expensive. We would like to propose the reallocation of approximately $7.3 billion of the CHT to initiate a paid leave. This should be structured similarly to standard parental benefits in Canada and would be paid non-consecutively at periods deemed necessary by the caregiver until the maximum allocation is reached. Additionally, if further funding is necessary, caregivers would be able to apply for additional grants based on financial need and the progression of the loved one's condition. We truly believe that just as new parents need to provide constant care to their newborns, it is vital that caregivers receive time off to provide constant care to their loved ones.
Our second proposition is the integration of community support programs and a matching service. Support groups have made significant positive impacts to mitigate depression, stress, and anxiety surrounding caregiving. This is improved through educational training groups and information guides. So we want to propose the incorporation of dementia-specific support groups in communities across Canada. These support groups would include free and accessible first aid and medical education sessions to help informal caregivers learn to effectively respond to recurring medical issues in dementia patients. This would include one-on-one sessions with medical professionals to discuss questions. We also want to include an affiliated matching service, which would match caregivers and patients to others with similar experiences, acting as another method to reduce stress. We want to expand this service to personal support workers and nurses, providing a confidential way for them to talk and learn from others with similar experiences, thus minimizing the overwhelming stress of dementia caregiving. So in general, these support groups would have free and accessible first aid and medical education sessions, one-on-one sessions with medical professionals, and a matching service to talk to others, learn from others, and reduce stress.
In summary, the 3 pillars of our proposal are to engage, empower, and educate. We want to engage with the matching service, empower through the caregiver-specific funding, and educate through the first aid and continuing medical education sessions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. One of the things that I really appreciate this presentation is the advocacy piece and that pushing to really to talk about how universities and students from this university can advocate for change within society and within our communities. I think it's very aspirational, but I think it does put in perspective of the change that is needed in advocacy and the level of advocacy. Certainly well thought out in terms of looking at that $7 billion initially and running it through. So great presentation, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. As a researcher who studies aging, aging at home is really important, and what you're advocating for is the opportunity for people to be able to have their loved ones age at home, because we know that there aren't enough facilities or individuals to work those facilities at this point. So great advocacy, and I really like your propositions.
Thanks so much.
So for me, growing old is really unsettling, because I've seen how seniors are treated in Canada or Ontario. So it's good to see that I have something to look forward to. So some great advocacy there and some good numbers, I think. So I can't wait to see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So that concludes our presentation session. We're about to transition. We're going to give away the certificates outside. There'll be some food there, and there'll also be takeout boxes if you're observing Ramadan as well. There's one more team that I want to highlight, and I didn't highlight them earlier, but I want to highlight them now because we're in their space. It is the Epicenter team, and they are what I call go-to people. Their team always rallies behind you, and all the events, I knew that when we were looking to do this event that we could they would do a wonderful job. And I want to thank Wen and her team for accommodating us. They even took their Zen garden and put it in here just for our presentation among all the furniture that's been moved. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for that. I've also got gifts for the judges, so before you leave, you'll grab one of those. And thank you everybody for supporting. Don't forget, we have a journal, and you all did very well. So I'm hoping you are willing to share your work and submit to compete for a spot in the journal, which is due in September. So that means I'm going to be hitting you up for an article very soon. So thank you very much. We'll see you outside.